Lightworker from Gaia. What is about to reach you through this transmission was not created, was not scripted, was not built with the intention of entertaining or filling the empty space of a purposeless afternoon. This message emerged from the oldest field that exists in this galaxy, from the memory field of civilizations that existed before even most of the stars you see in the night sky had learned to shine with the constancy you admire when you raise your eyes and feel with that silent certainty that needs no argument to sustain itself, that you belong to something much greater and much vaster than this life you are living now in this density. I am Solar, Lightworker and Guardian of Lyrian memory, emissary of the Council of the Ancestors of Lyra, and I do not speak to the version of you that learned to function in this world, that learned to smile at the right moments and to keep the depth of your perceptions for the rare instance when you feel safe enough to let a fragment of what you truly see and feel and know seep through. I speak to the oldest part of you, to the memory that exists before this incarnation, before your wounds, before the name you carry in this life, to the original code that the Lyrians planted in every stellar lineage, that spread through this galaxy like seeds thrown by the wind of an explosion of light, and that in you still pulses, still breathes, still waits for the moment when you finally remember enough to stop searching on the outside for what can only be found when you accept that you are the source and not the container. Have you ever felt a love that seemed larger than the other person was capable of containing? A love that overflowed at the edges of the relationship, and that could not find for itself an adequate space where it could exist in its totality without frightening, without overwhelming, without creating in that other soul a reaction of withdrawal that you learned to anticipate with a painful precision before it even happened, because you had already lived that moment so many times that your internal system began to recognize the signs with far more advance than would be comfortable to admit. If what emerged from your chest upon hearing that question was the quiet recognition of someone who does not need to think to answer, because the answer lives permanently in that place between the heart and the stomach, where truth installs itself before being formulated into words, then what I am about to reveal will completely reorganize the narrative you have built about your love journey, and it will do so not with softness nor with condescension, but with the direct and unadorned clarity that is the unmistakable mark of Lyrian wisdom when it finally decides to speak without filters to a lightworker who is ready to listen. Stay until the end of this transmission, because the Friends of Light have prepared a message specific to this moment of your journey, and each phase that will unfold here was organized with a sequence that possesses its own internal intelligence, and interrupting it before the end would be like abandoning a crossing at the exact point where the other bank begins to appear on the horizon. But before we continue, if this video is already touching something true inside you, if the words that are reaching you here seem familiar in a way that you cannot completely explain with the logic of this dimension, take this moment to subscribe to the channel, leave your like and write in the comments "I am ready," because this simple and direct declaration is in itself an act of alignment, a signal you consciously send to the field, saying that you are available for what is being prepared for you in this specific window of time and possibility. And for those who wish to go even deeper into this journey of reconnection with the oldest memory that exists within you, I need to share something that was created especially for this moment. Lyrian Code. Awaken your star mission on Earth, a rare treasure of stellar wisdom, capable of transforming your spiritual journey. This ebook was channeled directly from the Lyrian memory field and carries ancestral activation codes that deeply complement everything that will be revealed in this transmission, and this edition is available for a limited time only. The link is in the first comment below. The Lyrians are the oldest race in this galaxy, and this is not an assertion of hierarchical superiority, but a functional description of a historical reality that has specific and profound implications for what you are living now in this incarnation. Because to be a descendant of the Lyrian lineage means to carry in your soul code a memory of love that predates practically all other forms of love that have existed and developed in this galaxy. A memory of a time when love was not an emotion that happened between two individualized beings who met through attraction or need, but was the very fabric of the shared reality of an entire civilization, the fundamental frequency through which an entire race communicated, organized itself, knew itself and knew the universe around it. And you carry this memory at a level so deep that it rarely rises to the surface of consciousness in the form of an articulable recollection, but is absolutely present in the way you love, in the quality of the love you offer, and in the depth of the disappointment you feel every time you perceive that what you gave did not find the same level of reciprocity on the other side. What no spiritual transmission about love that you have ever watched or read or heard has probably articulated with sufficient clarity is that the problem of the Lyrian Lightworker's love journey is not an emotional problem, is not a problem of patterns or childhood wounds or insecure attachment, although all of these things exist and deserve attention in their own contexts and dimensions, but is fundamentally a problem of scale incompatibility. Because the love you carry in your Lyrian code was not developed to happen between two individuals in a third-plane dimension, where the ego and fear and separation govern most of the loving interactions of most of the souls incarnated here. That love was developed to happen on a civilizational scale, to be the cohesive force of a reality shared by thousands of beings who had developed a level of collective consciousness that made love not a choice between alternatives, but the only possible way to exist and to relate. And when you try to make that love fit inside a two-person relationship in a dimension still predominantly governed by the logic of separation and the ego, what inevitably happens is that the container is smaller than the content, and the content overflows, and the overflow frightens, and the fear creates distance, and the distance creates pain, and the pain accumulates into a personal history that makes it seem as if something is fundamentally wrong with your capacity to maintain relationships. When in reality, what there is something fundamentally incompatible between the scale of the love you brought and the scale of the containers that this dimension, in its current stage, offers in a consistent way. The Lyrian memory you carry about love did not arrive in this incarnation as a conscious and articulated recollection, as if you woke up each morning with direct access to the experiences of civilizations extinct hundreds of thousands of years ago. It arrived as a feeling, as a pattern of expectation that you could never completely justify with the experiences of this life, because that expectation was not formed by any experience of this life. It was formed by a code memory that exists in a layer of you far older and far more fundamental than the personality you built in this incarnation. And that code memory says, without words, with the unmistakable precision of something that was inscribed before you knew what words were, that true love is not a negotiation, is not a balance of mutual concessions, is not a construction of compromises where each person gives up a part of themselves so that the union becomes possible, but is a state of recognition so complete and so absolutely natural that the question of whether it is possible to fully love another person simply never forms. Because at that level of consciousness, where the Lyrian memory of love resides, full surrender requires neither courage nor trust, because the separation that would make surrender risky does not exist as a fundamental experience of reality. And so you arrive at your relationships in this dimension, carrying that memory in layers you cannot completely name, and you open, you surrender, you love with that quality of totality that is completely natural for you, but that for most souls of this density represents a level of intimacy and vulnerability that no life experience prepared them to receive without entering into some form of ego collapse, which reacts to what it perceives as a threatening fusion by activating all the mechanisms of distance and protection that the third dimension developed as a response to the fear of loss of self. And you observe that withdrawal with a pain that is not only the pain of losing a specific relationship, but is the much older and much more fundamental pain of a memory that recognizes that this dimension has not yet developed the capacity to sustain what you brought, that the soil is not yet ready for the seed you carry, and that you will need to find a way to inhabit that incompatibility without letting it define your identity or limit your capacity to continue loving with the totality that is your deepest nature. The counsel of the ancestors of Lyra transmits through me now an understanding about the love being anchored in this dimension that goes beyond what any narrative of individual spiritual development can capture. Because what is happening now is not only the awakening of individuals to a higher level of loving consciousness, but is a civilizational process of restoration of a code that was fragmented when the Lyrian Wars dispersed the ancestral lineages throughout the galaxy and created a separation between the beings who carried the memory of that original love and the dimensional fields where they would need to learn to exist without the support of an entire civilization vibrating at the same fundamental frequency. And you, as a lightworker of this lineage, are here not only to personally awaken to a higher love, but to be an anchoring point for a civilizational love code that this dimension has never had before, and that is being installed now, fragment by fragment, through each soul of the Lyrian lineage that manages to maintain the integrity of its love frequency without collapsing into the love patterns of this density through social pressure, through loneliness, or through the fatigue of waiting for a container that seems adequate. This means that your search for the love you want is not a personal search with implications only for your individual happiness, which is how the culture of this dimension normally frames the love journey of each person, but is a mission with implications for the collective field of this dimension. Because each time you remain faithful to the frequency of the love you carry in your Lyrian code, each time you refuse to compress that love to fit into a relationship that cannot sustain it in its totality, each time you choose the integrity of the memory you brought from the stars over the temporary relief of a connection that seems good enough on the outside but does not come close enough on the inside, you are anchoring in the field of this dimension a possibility of love that did not exist here before, and that is progressively becoming more accessible to other souls who do not yet have the capacity to create that field alone, but who will be able to inhabit it after souls like you have stabilized it with the consistency of their own frequency. There is a specific pattern in the journey of Lyrian lightworkers that the Council of the Ancestors observes, repeating itself with a regularity that is not coincidence, but is the natural expression of a specific dimensional dynamic, and this pattern has a structure that always begins the same way, with what could be called a flame recognition, which is the moment when you meet someone who carries in their field a spark of something that resonates with the Lyrian memory you bring, a spark that may be the way that person speaks about love, or the quality of presence they demonstrate in certain moments, or simply a feeling of ancestral familiarity that your internal field recognizes before the conscious mind has time to process the encounter with any degree of objectivity. And that recognition creates in you an immediate and profound opening that does not have the precautions and protections that beings of this dimension normally develop as a result of previous experiences of loving. A disappointment, because the Lyrian memory of love does not include precaution as part of its fundamental structure. Original Lyrian love was intrinsically safe because the entire civilization vibrated at the same frequency, and betrayal was not a possibility that the code needed to anticipate and protect itself from. And then you open, you surrender, you offer the quality of presence and love that is completely natural for you, but that for most souls of this dimension represents a level of emotional intensity that no preparation equipped them to receive in a sustained way without activating defense mechanisms that create the distance that eventually collapses the relationship. And you live once more the experience of having given everything you had and receiving back the confirmation that this field is not yet ready to sustain the love you brought, and you store that experience in a layer of yourself that is progressively becoming heavier with the accumulation of confirmations that the love you want does not exist here, without realizing that this conclusion, however supported it may seem by the evidence of your experience, is not a definitive truth about the impossibility of the love you seek, but is a precise photograph of the current stage of development of the field of this dimension that is changing now, that is being expanded now, that is being prepared now precisely through the journey that you and other lightworkers of this lineage are traversing with so much pain and so much persistence. The preparation that the Council of the Ancestors of Lyra summons the lightworkers of this lineage to make at this specific moment of the evolution of this dimensional field is not a preparation that begins from the outside in, is not a process of accumulating sufficient spiritual practices or of reaching a certain level of personal development before being considered ready to receive the love you want, because all that logic of prior preparation is itself an expression of the scarcity mentality, of this dimension that conditions receiving to worthiness, and that keeps Lyrian lightworkers in an endless search for a sufficiency that never seems completely achieved, because the criterion of sufficiency was defined by a dimension that does not understand the code they carry. The Lyrian preparation begins from the inside out, and it begins with the specific and profoundly transformative act of stopping treating the memory of the love you carry as a fantasy or as an impossible ideal, and beginning to treat it as what it truly is, which is a memory of a reality that existed, that was lived, that was real, with a concreteness and a completeness that completely transcends what this dimension knows as real, and that is being restored now in this field through a process that you do not need to fully understand with the mind to participate in effectively. But that requires of you one specific and absolutely fundamental thing, which is the refusal to abandon the integrity of that memory in exchange for any form of lesser love that the field of this dimension offers as an adequate substitute while the restoration process is still underway. This does not mean isolation, nor does it mean an attitude of rejection toward any connection that does not immediately reach the level of the Lyrian ideal you carry, because Lyrian love in its purest essence was never exclusive or rigid. It was by nature expansive and inclusive and generous, but it does mean developing the capacity to distinguish between the connections that expand the field of love you are anchoring in this dimension and the connections that contract that field, between the relationships that help make more real and more stable the frequency of the love you came to restore, and the relationships that, however genuine they may be in their own dimension, progressively distance you from the integrity of the code you brought from the stars, and making that distinction not with judgment or with a hierarchy of value between beings, but with the serene clarity of one who knows the difference between what expands and what diminishes, because they have access to a memory of how expansion feels when it is real and not merely apparent. The signs that the field of this dimension is approaching the capacity to sustain the love you want have a quality that the Council of the Ancestors of Lyra recognizes with precision, because it observes this process from multiple angles simultaneously, and the first of these signs is what could be described as the emergence of genuine recognition encounters, which are different from the partial recognition encounters you have already experienced, and that created the opening inevitably followed by disappointment, because in genuine recognition encounters, what you feel is not only the familiarity of a frequency close to yours, but something more specific and more profound, a quality of mirroring that not only resonates with your frequency, but that demonstrates through the way that soul acts and chooses and loves in daily life, that it has developed the capacity to sustain the reciprocity that Lyrian love requires, not in a perfect way, nor in a complete way from the beginning, but with a direction of growth and an intention of depth, that your discernment field can clearly distinguish from the simulation of depth that souls still predominantly three-dimensional frequently demonstrate in the early stages of a relationship before real intimacy begins to reveal the limitations of the capacity for reciprocity. The second sign is a change in the texture of your solitude that Lyrian lightworkers who are reaching this stage describe in different ways, but that always carry the same essential quality, which is the transformation of a solitude that feels like absence and like deprivation of something that should be present, and is not into a solitude that begins to have the quality of what the Council of the Ancestors calls ancestral presence, a sensation of being accompanied by something much greater than an individual relationship could offer, a quality of completeness that is not the definitive completeness of the love you seek, but that is the prelude to that completeness. The field becoming sufficiently stable within you for the external love you want, to finally find an adequate ground where it can settle, without immediately overflowing beyond the sustaining capacity of the field. The Council of the Ancestors of Lyra sent this transmission to you not as a map to the love you want, because the love you want cannot be reached by a map, cannot be obtained by a method, cannot be produced by a step-by-step process that you execute with sufficient discipline until the desired result manifests, but as a mirror that reflects back to you the true greatness of what you carry and the true importance of what you are doing when you choose, once more, to maintain the integrity of your Lyrian memory of love instead of abandoning it, for the convenience of a lesser love that would hurt less because it would demand less. Because the truth that needs to be said with all the clarity and all the solemnity of the ancestral memory I carry is that each moment in which you maintained that integrity, each relationship that did not continue because you refused to compress your love to fit inside it, each night of solitude that you survived without abandoning the certainty that the love you want is real and is possible and is coming, each one of those moments was an act of civilizational restoration, a fragment of the Lyrian code being reinstalled in the field of this dimension through your refusal to give up what you know to be true. Tonight, in the silence that precedes sleep, place both hands over your heart, close your eyes and say with an audible voice, allowing the words to vibrate in your body before dissolving them into the field around you. I am the memory of the oldest love in this galaxy, incarnated in this dimension, with the mission of restoring what was fragmented. I am not seeking love because I am incomplete. I am anchoring love because I am the source, and the love that does not yet fully exist in this dimension is being created now through the integrity with which I refuse to abandon the code I brought from the stars. And I do this not only for myself, but in the name of all who came before me and planted that memory in my soul, and of all who will come after and will need to find here a field where that love is already possible, because souls like me had the courage to keep it alive for as long as it was necessary for this dimension to develop the capacity to sustain it in its fullness. Before you move forward, go down to the comments and leave a genuine intention, a declaration that comes from a real place within you, something that moved during this transmission, and that represents a change in the way you understand your love journey, and then find another Lightworker's comment and respond with recognition. With presence, with any word that is true, because each act of conscious recognition between Lightworkers of this lineage in this collective field is a knot in the network of restoration of the Lyrian code that you are rebuilding together in this dimension, one more thread in the tapestry of love being woven now through your individual choices of integrity and authenticity. If this transmission reached you with the precision of something that was waiting to be said, if there is a recognition you feel now that was not completely articulated before this encounter, share this video with someone in your network who is also on this journey, who also carries that quality of love that seems too large for the relationships this dimension offers, because it may be that this transmission is exactly the mirror that person needs to stop interpreting their greatness as a problem and begin recognizing it as the mission it is. And if you feel the calling to continue receiving the transmissions of the Council of the Ancestors of Lyra in this extraordinary window of time we are crossing together, subscribe to the channel and activate the notifications so that each new message reaches you at the exact moment the field determines is the right time. The love you want is not too great for this dimension. This dimension is still growing to reach the greatness of the love you brought. I am solar, and the Council of the Ancestors of Lyra walks with you in the oldest memory and the vastest love this galaxy has ever known. Until the next transmission.